Hello guys and welcome to one more Blade Ride. Today we're gonna learn how to play the Edge Dawnfall by Awaken Realms. Don't be intimidated by the huge box. It does contain a lot of components, but it's not complicated. I will walk you through it. The Edge Dawnfall is a mix of a war game, board game and card game in a dark setting that crosses fantasy and horror with steampunk. You will need to build an effective deck, gather and manage your resources, and finally lead your faction to victory. During the game, players try to eradicate the opponent's army, upgrade their own squads, and capture crystals used to power many cards and abilities. The battle ends as soon as one of the players manages to gather the number of victory points required, or destroys all of the enemy's models, or runs out of action card in his action deck. In this case, the player with the highest number of victory points wins. Let's start with the setup of a two-player game between two of the factions. I have selected Chapter and Demons. For a 3 or 4 player game, there is 2 modes you can choose from, either all against each other or team versus team mode, and in both cases you will need 1 extra board. We start by placing the board and 20 crystals and 20 charge tokens next to it. Players can earn crystals during the game and move them to their own crystal pools. As you can see, the battle map on the board consists of spaces, each made up of 7 hexes. Spaces are used to determine ranges when moving, shooting, casting spells, and performing other ranged actions. There are also the 2 dice of the game. The yellow one you can use for free, but it's weaker, whereas the red one is stronger, but has to be paid for each time you decide to use it. When both players are ready, they roll the red die to see who goes first, and that player receives the My Turn token. Now it's time to choose sides. The first player picks a faction, and then the second player takes one of the remaining factions. Each player collects all elements of their faction: the squad deck, the action deck, 1 banner card, 1 help card, 1 shrine token, 1 faction sheet, all faction-specific tokens, and finally, all their models. Each faction owns a single banner card that gives them a unique set of powers, and each player places their banner card on their banner slot. Each side may field up to 5 squads for a given match. You select any 5 of your squad cards and place them in the squad slots on your side of the board. Make sure the lighter side of each card faces up, which is the basic mode. Each squad card represents one group of 1 to 4 models, and you place them on their respective squad cards. On each squad card, place a number of endurance tokens equal to the value indicated by the gray shield icon on the card. These represent the number of wounds a squad can take before a model is killed. Each player now builds their action deck by choosing 25 action cards among the ones available for their faction. These are the key to victory, so their selection is very important. For your first games, you can use the ones suggested in the pre-constructed starting deck. Now both players shuffle their 25 card action decks and put them on their respective slots face down. Now the first player chooses whether to become the positioning player, who will be initiating all deployment stages, or the countering player, who will begin the match and take the first turn. If she chooses the first, then she needs to pass the My Turn token to the countering player. Each faction owns 1 shrine token with a unique and helpful ability. Starting with the positioning player, both players now place their faction shrine token on the board map. Then you set up 4 crystal source tokens, which represent natural deposits that both forces will fight over in order to gather crystals. And finally, it's time to populate the board map with the warriors. There are no deployment zones in this game. Players may set up their models across the entire board map. Starting with the positioning player, players take turns placing all models of a chosen squad on the map, trying to counter their opponent's models and placing themselves in the best position to gather crystals. The players may place their models on any empty hexes. The only requirements are that the entire base of each model has to fit inside a single space without its base crossing the border between spaces, and that a model cannot be placed in a base-to-base contact with any shrine, crystal source, or enemy model. Base-to-base is a direct contact without any small hex of separation. If the squad had more than 1 model, the subsequent models have to be placed in base-to-base contact with at least 1 model from the same squad, but without them needing to be placed within the same space. You also need to place a victory marker right in the middle of the victory points track, and each player places their faction token on the final blue space of the track. If at any point the victory marker ends up on top of any faction token, the game ends at the end of the current turn. Each player takes 2 crystals from the neutral pile and places them in their crystal pools. These are the starting crystals of each player, and here's where you place them after being used in the depleted pool. Each player now draws 3 cards as their starting hand from the top of their action decks. The positioning player may move one of their squads. The countering player starts the match and takes a full turn and then passes the My Turn token. Now let's see the flow of the game and what you do during your turn. At the beginning of each turn, a player has to decide whether they want to be passive or active. In an active turn, a player may play cards, use the banner card, and activate one of the squads. You may play any number of action cards from your hand as long as you can afford to pay the costs, which is always displayed on the top left corner of the action card. Each action card contains 2 actions. There's the upper action, which is a generic action that may be used on any of your squads, and a lower action, which is a restricted action that may only be used on a specific squad. An action card can be played at any point during your turn, and the same holds for activating a chosen squad. One, more, or all models of this squad may now move and initiate combat in any order. Additionally, right after the player decides to activate the squad, before any of its models performs any action, the player may change the mode of their squad card, which changes its attributes. As soon as you play an action, you discard the card, with the exception of enhancements which attach to a squad card. At the end of every turn, as in both yours and your opponent's, you draw action cards until you have 3 in hand. Note that there are some instant actions, the ones with the white border and the lightning icon. Unlike regular actions, they can be played even during the opponent's active turn. Now, during their passive turn, a player performs a series of steps that provide them with new resources and refresh their old ones. The player gathers crystals, 1 from each control crystal source on the board map, and adds them to their crystal pool. A crystal source is considered controlled if there is at least one of your models and no enemy models in base-to-base contact with this crystal source token. The player also adds 1 charge token to each enhancement card attached to their squads and also refreshes the crystals by moving them back from the depleted pool. If the player's banner card is currently face down, they flip it back face up. The battle continues until one of the endgame conditions are met, which are the following. One of the players loses all of their models, or the victory marker reaches the end of the victory track. If at any point the victory marker reaches the slot marked by any player's faction token, you play the current player's turn to its end, and after that the player with the most victory points wins. Or if any of the players drew the last card from their action deck. You again continue the current turn until its end, and the player with the most victory points wins. Now let's have a look at the squad cards. This shows the number of models in each squad. This shows the squad's endurance, and here's the attributes: initiative, attack, defense, and movement. Initiative determines the agility and reaction time of a squad. It is used in combat to indicate which model attacks first and when targeted by a shooting action. High initiative models are harder to hit at the range. Endurance is used to determine how many victory points models of this squad are worth. The enemy receives that many victory points anytime they kill one of the squad's models. And it's also used to determine how many wounds a squad can take before it starts losing models. Whenever a model receives a wound, you remove an endurance token from its squad card. Whenever a model without any endurance tokens on its squad card is wounded, it dies. You may also remove endurance tokens from any of your squads as an equivalent of using up crystals. Crystals are the basic currency of the game, and they're used to pay costs for the most special actions and strongest abilities. If a player can't or won't spend the required number of crystals, they may cover the cost or part of it with endurance tokens of their squads or victory points. It's important to have a look at how movement works in the game. Each model and each map token must always fit within a single space, and they can never be placed across the thick line separating the spaces. Also, models cannot end their move overlapping any shrine or crystal source token or enemy models with an equal or larger base size. If a squad has more than one models, each model may move separately and in a different direction, but it's considered to be happening at the same time. The player may move one, all, or some of the models in the squad. Each model can move any number of spaces without exceeding its squad movement attribute. A player can also use a move action to move a model from a hex to another hex of the same space. If a model ends up with its base overlapping a hex or hexes already occupied by a model with a smaller base, which can be of an enemy or it can be yours, the larger model pushes the smaller one away. The player who performs this move action or uses this ability places the pushed model in any of the unoccupied hexes next to its pushing model, as long as the bases of both models remain in contact. If a model cannot be placed by following this rule, then it cannot be pushed. You cannot push any models away while in the middle of your move. Pushing is only possible when you end your move at the final space you end up. Also, if a model's base, when passing, cannot fit into unoccupied hexes of a particular space, the model must take another route. Now that we saw how to move, let's see how combat works. A combat action allows each of the squad's model to perform a single combat sequence against a single enemy model in base-to-base contact. If the squad performing the combat action has more than one model, each of these models may fight different enemies independently from the rest of the squad, and in this case the active player decides in which order the combat sequences are gonna be resolved, but they're not treated as simultaneous. First thing on the combat sequence is to compare the initiative attribute in both models' squads. The one with the higher initiative will attack first. If there is a tie on initiative, the attacker goes first. Then the player performing the attack chooses which die to roll. Then the player rolls the chosen die and adds the attack attribute of their squad to their result. The total result is the attack power. Note that if the roll result shows a cogwheel marked die side, the player may choose to either pay 1 crystal if it was with the yellow die and reroll the die, or accept the result of the roll and place 1 depleted crystal back in the crystal pool. A reroll can happen only once. Then the player defending from the attack chooses which die to roll as well, rolls it and adds the defense attribute of their squad to the result, giving the defense power. If the attack power is higher than the defense power, then the attack was successful and the target receives 1 wound and the combat sequence ends there. If the defense power is equal or greater than the attack power, then the attack was unsuccessful. The target remains unaffected and may counter-attack. The counter-attack works in the same way as the attack. But note that you can only do 1 counter-attack. When a model receives a wound, then the model squad loses 1 endurance token, or if its squad has no endurance tokens left, the model is killed. Endurance tokens are shared between all models of a squad, even if the models are far away from each other. Every time a model loses or sacrifices an endurance token, then it applies to the entire squad. Whenever all models of a single squad die, you do not remove their squad card, enhancement cards, or charges. That's mainly because some actions allow you to resurrect or return dead models, and in this case, they're still eligible to use any enhancement earned by their squad. Players can also shoot if their card allows for a shooting action, and like in combat, they roll a die and compare initiative. If the result is lower or equal to the initiative of the target, the shoot missed the target. If the result is higher, you apply the effect described on the card. Unless the card specifies otherwise, you must choose 1 model in the shooting squad to perform the shot. The target should be within range and connected to the attacker through a straight line of spaces that are not fully occupied. Last, some actions involve sacrificing a model or an endurance token. Whenever a model is killed as a result of a sacrifice, the opponent does not gain any victory points. And that was the Edge Dawnfall. Now you're ready for your first game. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comment section below, and I hope you enjoy the game.